This is BofC Live, the video and podcast series of Business of Cannabis. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com. Coming up on BofC Live, a conversation with Matt Maurer. He is the co-chair of the Cannabis Law Group at Torkin Manes, the official law firm of Business of Cannabis in Canada. Matt wanted to check in about the future of Canadian cannabis law in 2022. This is a conversation with Matt Maurer of Torkin Manes. Matt Maurer, Happy New Year. You are with Torkin Manes, our official law firm of Business of Cannabis. Nice to see you.
Happy New Year, Jay. Nice to see you.
Happy New Year. Is that a question?
Yeah, let's just see. This is going to be a statement, but Happy New Year.
It's definitely a new year. That's not the question. The happy part was the question. Well,
Happy
New Year. Well, I want to talk to you about cannabis news, cannabis industry, and cannabis law. Sure. Anything over the past year that struck you of interest that'll impact this year? It's a lot easier to buy cannabis on the street in Toronto. I mean, not on the street, but density.
On the street, curbside pickup. You can, literally, quite literally. I'm trying to think of what happened in the past year because the last 2 or 3 are kind of all a blur. It's going to be an interesting year. Like I feel like we're kind of settling in, and by we I mean the industry is just sort of settling into its groove, and things are starting to settle. I think we saw that first with the LPs, where it was kind of like rapid expansion, and then maybe we've done, well, not maybe, in some cases we certainly did expand too much and we had to close things and scale back and sell things. I feel like the LPs, some of them are really starting to find their groove on certain products, whether it's a segment, certain companies doing certain segments well, or even a product within a segment really well. I feel like there's some brand recognition there. And then obviously on the retail side, in Ontario, I think that if the AGCO public notice notifications are any indication, we've slowed down on the pace of opening for sure. And I think we're going to shift into, who's going to make it, how well are they going to do, what are things going to look like, and kind of let the dust settle a bit. Probably have some closures in 2022 in Ontario for sales, for stores, or retail sales for sure. And then a lot of the other provinces, some of them are shifting from the government model to a private. BC is slowly building its retail infrastructure as it has been since 2018 or whatever.
Even before 2018.
I was actually going to say fair comment, before 2018. So, and then even outside of retail and the LPs, which I guess are kind of the traditional segments of the market, there's others, but there's always room for surprise and innovation. And so it's going to be, maybe it's going to be tech, more tech this year. Maybe it'll be some accessories. Maybe we'll see consumption lounges. The dialogue start to change a little bit. Tourism. Let's see if we get regular tourism export or import before we get cannabis tourism export or import. But I think it's going to continue to be this year will continue to be another interesting period in the industry, especially with, we've got that 3-year Cannabis Act review coming up. Although I don't think the government has to table the recommendations till next year. But that's coming up too. So there's going to be, Manitoba's doing a consult on consumption lounges. I think the consult on the Cannabis Act is closed. I can't remember. But there's a lot of things happening as per usual. And then, of course, if you go look into the States, it's everything's, on overdrive right now.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting, and it's you always get asked the question, sort of, where are you in a what period are in the hockey game or what of a baseball game, and it's like we're definitely not in the first anymore, certainly in Canada, but we're entering this phase where it's going to be closer to steady state, certainly in terms of retail density, certainly in Ontario. What about products? What about innovations? What about, like, all those things seem to be entering another phase? But it is interesting, I think, and you mentioned it, to measure our phase of where we are to like net new markets like in New York, where the conversations they're having in New York, I mean, were probably panel conversations you were on as part of our events 2-3 years ago, right? Like, how does retail roll out? Who says yes? Who says no? Why is saying no? Can you manufacture here? Can you produce there? Can you sell it here? Is there delivery, e-com? lounges, like all those things are still early days, which is interesting sort of to gauge the different playing fields.
Totally. And I see this, sometimes when I talk to attorneys in the UK, they're talking to me and it's like I'm being talked at in a way that, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but in a way that was the same discussions everyone here was having in 2017 and 2018, like very early Canadian days across the pond, as they say, in the UK. And the States is no different. And then you look at other countries, Malta's doing, moving forward. Other countries are moving forward. And then I don't know if it'll be this year. I highly doubt it. But then there's the whole kind of global aspect of it. We've already seen some pressure to allow for imports into Canada, which, years ago, there was a little bit of talk about this where people said, well, are you ever going to let imports in? And people would say, well, why would the government do that? They forced all these LPs to spend tens of millions of dollars on these crazy facilities. And then they're going to go shoot them all in the foot by letting, places like Mexico and California and Florida and in Central America import, where the cost per gram of production is just like a fraction of what it is here, right? So, we might see that we might not see how the global market comes together, but we're going to see more global development certainly in 2022, and then maybe 2023 will be the year where we see how those trade pieces start fitting in together.
So we talk trade, we talk overall landscape about relative to the US. I want to dive deep on some very specific issue that gets lots of chatter, certainly on Twitter and LinkedIn, but I think actually is a pain point for retailers, both in operationally, but also from a safety perspective and security perspective. And that is the ability or lack of ability for retailers to do something about their windows, right? And can you see into a facility? Can you not? What does it mean? What are the rules? There seems to be ironically, a lack of clarity around this issue, around the front windows. What is your sense of where that is today, either in Ontario or overall? And like, do you think there'll be movement on that to provide an added layer of security for retailers to not have to fog down their windows, but also help them do business at street level?
Yeah, I hope so. And just like anything, that seems to drive change, first you kind of have to have a discussion and sort of a dialogue about it, sort of hit a certain point before a decision maker starts looking at this like something that needs to be changed. And I think, unfortunately, the robberies we're seeing in Alberta, I had a client call me today. They got robbed yesterday. Thankfully no one was hurt. Thankfully it wasn't a lot of money, but we're seeing all these robberies in Alberta, here in Ontario as well, other provinces certainly too. And like, is that what it's going to take for this to have to change? Because the whole requirement in Ontario is you're not allowed to, the products can't be visible from the street. Why? Well, it can only be one of two things or both, which is, heaven forbid a child, sees something through the window, that enticing packaging that everyone's allowed to carry in their shops. Yes, very, highly colorful, lots of cartoon characters, all those things.
Excise stamp.
Excise stamp. Or, is it converting non-consumers into consumers? And either way, when you look at the LCBOs that not only have clear windows, but in some cases use those windows for window displays to entice people to come in. So you've got that on one hand, you've got the security aspect on the other hand. And then the real question is, what is this accomplishing aside from putting people in danger? And even if it doesn't put every store in danger, one is enough. And like at that point, we should be having a discussion about, are there benefits to obscuring the windows in the first place? And if there are, let's assume there are. Do they outweigh what's happening as a result of people just being able to run into the store and no one can see what's going on inside?
Yeah.
So hopefully this year we see a little bit of change about that. It just, to me, it doesn't seem like a regulation that makes much sense. There's a whole bunch of them, regulations that don't make much sense in the Federal Act in the various provinces. And me personally, I've been prepared to sort of be patient with it, because when we did this when we being Canada, not me and you, certainly, but when the government legalized in 2018, they wrote all these laws in the abstract to try to encompass all these situations that might happen. Now we're living with them and we're seeing how it plays out in real terms. And in some cases, like the storefronts, that causes security problems and safety problems. In other cases, it just, results in ridiculous outcomes and, redundancies. So now that we're in that 3-year review, hopefully we can start having a meaningful conversation about changing some of these things that don't make sense for industry, don't make sense for consumers, and we can change them without having a negative impact on society in general. My only concern, which is how it has been for the last few years, is that unfortunately, the same government arm that regulates our cannabis industry regulates the pandemic, for lack of a better word, regulates. So they've got their hands full. Whether or not they're doing a lot of stuff on that front is debatable, but it's probably not top of priority, top of mind for them right now, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, that's helpful, because I think that is something, we've gone from the very, that's provincially run, provincially governed, very specific to retailers, to broader sort of conversation around even potency limits at the federal level. Like, there's lots of things on the horizon that will change, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, or certainly will be addressed. And that's why we like connecting with you always, Matt Maurer. So we appreciate the partnership. We look forward to the year ahead. Thank you for your time today. I will say definitively Happy New Year, as opposed to question mark Happy New Year. And we look forward to connecting with you down the road. Happy New Year to you as well. And I will say it, we can make it a Happy New Year regardless of our external circumstances. That's right. There's actually you probably drive by it on Bloor Street. The Paradise Theater on Bloor and Dovercourt says Happy-ish New Year. That's what it says. I haven't seen it yet, but I will keep my eye. Listen, and it's early January. We have to start optimistic, right? Sure. Sure. As we lock down in the basement once again. Well, Matt, nonetheless, we will see you down the road, whether like this or in person or both. Thanks for making time. Always a pleasure, Jay. Thank you for joining us. That was Matt Maurer of Torkin Manes. If you like this program, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you heard the show. It helps support the work we do. We're able to do what we do because of ongoing partnerships with Alterna Savings, Cannabis at Work, Cannabis Benchmarks, Can Delta, Gallagher, Headset, and Torkin Manes. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com.